use it, I probably mismatched that. So thinking through what makes sense, pulling all the pieces together about how the structure affects that. Real estate loans, smaller margins, just thinking, what does this mean to me? Does the structure that you're proposing, does it meet the real need? Do you understand the real need, or are you just filling what the customer said? Well, he asked me for a $500,000 line. Well, is that what he really needs to solve the business problems that he's got? And Todd alluded to this one a little bit, and this is something I think that we all need to get better. And Kurt and I had a long conversation after the last discussion, which is about retention. Obviously, the longer we keep this loan, the more money we make. And as most of you guys could see, in certain loans, we actually lose money the first year. And in a lot of loans, we don't meet our ROE targets. So is the structure one that this customer is going to like for a really long time that the bank makes money at? Have I thought through how to keep this structure? I mean, how to keep this customer? And what else would enhance retention when I'm putting a structure together other than the loan structure? What else enhances it? Mm-hmm. Right. All the other products, and I'll tell you, Business Gateway, what a great way to keep a customer because they really get locked in and people don't want to disrupt their computers. All of those kind of things. Have I set somebody up to keep my costs where they should be, to keep them happy, pull the whole thing together? Yeah. Absolutely, and from a long-term standpoint, which we covered today in Brad's conversation, and we can't track today all the referrals we give other parts of the bank, but as stockholders, if we're trying to create that value that he's talking about, all the other products, you add that on, you get a structure, you get your 15% ROE, but you sell him cash management, you get all his deposits, you get his personal loans. Number one, you're going to keep him longer, and number two, you've created more shareholder value with probably just about the same amount of time invested that you would have had you just given him his $200,000 line. Then the obvious question that you guys face all the time is this structure competitive given the business environment? Can I win this business with this structure? It may do all these other things, but if I can't get it, where now do I need to make my compromises? Okay, we always hear rules of thumb, things people throw out there. The SCOs always tell me, oh yeah, everybody knows the rules of thumb. And they want to know, oh, but this is 10% of revenues or this. What are some rules of thumb that you guys use today? 10% of sales. Okay, so we get 10% of sales, 75% of ARs. What's the rule? What's the rule you use there? Okay, 1.5 debt service coverage.
Okay, 1.5.
Okay, any other rules? Okay, here are the rules that you kind of hear. 10% of revenues, 75% of ARs, 2 months operating expenses. This isn't really a rule of thumb, but you get faced with this, and it probably gets thrown at you, which is some guy, he wants $2 million, even though he doesn't qualify for it on his business, but he does on his personal side, and so kind of how you make that. So Mike James gave us a rule of thumb today. Does anybody remember what it is? I think it's going to be a real governing rule of thumb. CDS, thumbs up or thumbs down, and I think that's the main rule we need to know. Yeah, so CDS is pass or fail. It's a rule of thumb that's unique to us in Wells Fargo. Now, why don't the rules of thumb work? So you go and you look and you say, well, I've got 75% of ARs, and it is October, and you've got somebody that, yeah, seasonality. You're looking at their balance sheet at a point in time where all their business is. So they've got $3 million in ARs. Well, they've only got $4 million in sales. It's not to mean you don't want to give them $3 million on an AR line because they may need it for that period of time, or $2 million, whatever. But it's something that you need to understand if it's seasonal. The other flip side is what happens when you look at that guy and his ARs are 20,000, but his sales are 4 million. Okay, so you got to understand, which you talked about earlier, the seasonality of the business. He's got bad customers. They're not paying him. He's at 150 days on his ARs. You going to lend 75% of those ARs? No, why not? Quality of collateral, that's right. You're not going to get it. You're not going to get paid back. He's growing really quickly. So what rule of thumb does that mess up a little bit? 10%. He's going to need more. And you got to think about then how do you get him more to meet his growing needs without compromising all the things that we've been talking about. General contractors, I don't know how many of you guys have put lines for general contractors, but they're tricky. They need big bonding lines that their balance sheets rarely support. So what do we do for those guys? What's the way to take a look at them? Nothing. CalCap. Look at the outside net worth. This is one where Mike talked about compromising on guarantees. You don't ever want to compromise on a guarantee for this because this guy gets that money and the line's going to be out of size. And the company who just signed a big contract. What's the problem there? Okay, concentration, that's a good one. What? Will they perform on the contract? What about their possible collateral? What assets do you think we have today to lend against? Sorry? Don't have anything, yeah. Sometimes we need to do inventory financing because we've got a growing business, we've got somebody that's taking off, and we need to take a look at their inventory to help bridge the gap of growth. And then cash businesses, if you, yeah. You have to find out, it depends on your collateral. So like in our case of Mays, we called the collateral department and we said to them, here's what we've got, what would you let us lend? And they said 25%. On Mays.
On sporting
equipment? On our sporting equipment. It's not great.
Well,
it's not, you know, you're going to kind of have to sell it one at a time. You're not going to. Right. The further away it is from its natural state, the harder it is to sell. Yeah. So.
Well, I mean, and we'll talk about it more in the case. But right. The fact is how many times you go into a Big Five or
and they're liquidating the heck out of those soccer balls.
70% off. Well, if they have to do that to get rid of stuff, what do we have to do?
And that's something we'll talk about when we get into collateral, which is the
right.
value to the customer as an ongoing concern, the value to us as a bank, and the valuation and liquidation, and they are totally different.
You don't go in a lumber yard and see 50% off of cedar because lumber's a raw material. It holds its value better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, when you're determining line size, let's say you've got it down, you know that you're going to do a line, and you've got all these rules of thumb. Some other tools, one of which you guys used in the case, is the financing gap. How much is not being financed by the trade? And something that wasn't in the financing gap worksheet, but hopefully people figured out as they thought about it is, there's two places you can finance yourself. And we talked a lot about that in Todd's presentation. What are the two places? Where do we get sources to fund? When we make a loan, which is our assets, we can do what? Sorry? Okay, but let's talk about actual, like the borrowing. If you look at the balance sheet, where are the two places that you can get money to buy those ARs or to fund those ARs? Your capital and your debt. And in that financing gap, what may not have been clear is you can use both to fill that need, whatever number you came up with on your financing gap. It's not only from debt. Okay, you've got some capital that's already in your business. Now you got to pay for your fixed assets. You got some other things, but there's capital. So if you got worried about the line size you came up with that you needed, you got some capital to cover some of that. And then look at the historic and anticipated usage. And somebody threw out earlier today, taking a look at the interest expense on tax returns, taking a look at several quarterly statements to try and find out how much are they really using now and what's going to change so that we set line sizes that are appropriate really for the business. If they tell you they need $750,000 and you go look at their statement and they have $10,000 worth of interest expense, probably aren't using that kind of money. So what's changing? It's not to say you don't want to give it to them, but what changed? What's going to be different tomorrow than you had today? Okay, collateral. Let's talk about that. What are your considerations when you go to decide if you're going to take it, what you're going to take, how much you're going to take? What do you think about? Okay, what do you